Section 44 of the Third Voyage of James Cook, Volume 2 by James Cook. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Book 4, Chapter 12, Part 1. Departure from Oonalashka and Future Views. The Island Amokta. Situation of a remarkable rock. The strait between Oonalashka and Oonella repassed. Progress to the south. Melancholy accident on board the Discovery. Moe, one of the Sandwich Islands discovered. Intercourse with the natives. Visit from Teriobu. Another island called Owaihi discovered. The ships ply to windward to get round it. An eclipse of the moon observed. The crew refused to drink sugar-cane beer. Cordage deficient in strength. Commendation of the natives of Owaihi. The Resolution gets to windward of the island. Her progress down the southeast coast. Views of the country and visits from the natives. The Discovery joins. Slow progress westward. Karakakaua Bay examined by Mr. Bligh. Vast concourse of the natives. The ships anchor in the bay. In the morning of Monday the 26th, we put to sea from Samganuda harbour, and as the wind was southerly, stood away to the westward. My intention was now to proceed to Sandwich Islands, there to spend a few of the winter months, in case we should meet with the necessary refreshments, and then to direct our course to Kamchatka, so as to endeavour to be there by the middle of May, the ensuing summer. In consequence of this resolution, I gave Captain Clerke orders how to proceed in case of separation, appointing Sandwich Islands for the first place of rendezvous, and the harbour of Petropavlovska in Kamchatka for the second. Soon after we were out of the harbour, the wind veered to the southeast and east-southeast, which, by the evening, carried us as far as the western part of Oonalashka, where we got the wind at south. With this we stretched to the westward till 7 o'clock the next morning, when we wore and stood to the east. The wind, by this time, had increased in such a manner as to reduce us to our 3 courses. It blew in very heavy squalls attended with rain, hail and snow. At 9 o'clock in the morning of the 28th, the island of Oonalashka bore southeast, 4 leagues distant. We then wore and stood to the westward. The strength of the gale was now over, and toward evening the little wind that blew insensibly veered round to the east, where it continued but a short time before it got to northeast, and increased to a very hard gale with rain. I steered first to the southward, and as the wind inclined to the north and northwest, I steered more westerly. On the 29th, at 6:30 in the morning, we saw land extending from east by south to south by west, supposed to be the island Amokta. At 8, finding that we could not weather the island, as the wind had now veered to the westward, I gave over plying and bore away for Oonalashka, with a view of going to the northward and eastward of that island, not daring to attempt a passage to the southeast of it in so hard a gale of wind. At the time we bore away, the land extended from east by south a half south to south-southwest, 4 leagues distant. The longitude by the timekeeper was 191 degrees 17 minutes, and the latitude 53 degrees 38 minutes. This will give a very different situation to this island from that assigned to it upon the Russian map. But it must be remembered that this is one of the islands which Mr. Ismailoff said was wrongly placed. Indeed, it is a doubt if this be a Malta. Footnote: on the chart of Krenitzen's and Levanchev's voyage in 1768 and 1769, which we find in Mr. Cox's book, page 251, an island called Amukta is laid down, not very far from the place assigned to Amukta by Captain Cook. End footnote. For after Ismailoff had made the correction, no land appeared upon the map in this latitude. But as I have observed before, we must not look for accuracy in this chart. At 11 o'clock, as we were steering to the northeast, we discovered an elevated rock, like a tower, bearing north-northeast a half east, 4 leagues distant. It lies in the latitude of 53 degrees 57 minutes and in the longitude of 191 degrees 2 minutes, and hath no place in the Russian map. Footnote: though this rock had no place in the Russian map produced by Ismailoff, it has a place in the chart of Krenitzen's and Levanchev's voyage above referred to. The chart also agrees with Captain Cook's as to the general position of this group of islands. The singularly indented shores of the island of Oonalashka are represented in both charts much alike. These circumstances are worth attending to, as the more modern Russian maps of this archipelago are so wonderfully erroneous. End footnote. We must have passed very near it in the night. We could judge of its steepness from this circumstance, that the sea, which now ran very high, broke nowhere but against it. At 3 in the afternoon, after getting a sight of Oonalashka, we shortened sail and hauled the wind, not having time to get through the passage before night. At daybreak the next morning, we bore away under courses and close-reefed topsails, having a very hard gale at west-northwest, with heavy squalls attended with snow. At noon we were in the middle of the strait, between Oonalashka and Unela, the harbour of Samganuda bearing south-southeast, 1 league distant. At 3 in the afternoon, being through the strait and clear of the isles, Cape Providence bearing west-southwest, 2 or 3 leagues distant, we steered to the southward under double-reefed topsails and courses, with the wind at west-northwest, a strong gale, and fair weather. On Monday the 2nd of November, the wind veered to the southward, and before night blew a violent storm, which obliged us to bring to. The Discovery fired several guns, which we answered, but without knowing on what occasion they were fired. At 8 o'clock we lost sight of her, and did not see her again till 8 the next morning. At 10 she joined us, and, as the height of the gale was now over, and the wind had veered back to west-northwest, we made sail and resumed our course to the southward. The 6th, in the evening, being in the latitude of 42 degrees 12 minutes, and in the longitude of 201 degrees 26 minutes, the variation was 17 degrees 15 minutes east. The next morning, our latitude being 41 degrees 20 minutes, and our longitude 202 degrees, a shag or cormorant flew several times round the ship. As these birds are seldom, if ever, known to fly far out of sight of land, I judged that some was not far distant. However, we could see none. In the afternoon, there being but little wind, Captain Clerke came on board, and informed me of a melancholy accident that happened on board his ship the second night after we left Samganuda. The main tack gave way, killed one man, and wounded the boatswain and 2 or 3 more. In addition to this misfortune, I now learned that on the evening of the 3rd his sails and rigging received considerable damage, and that the guns which he fired were the signal to bring to. On the 8th the wind was at north, a gentle breeze with clear weather. On the 9th, in the latitude of 39½ degrees, we had 8 hours calm. This was succeeded by the wind from the south, attended with fair weather. Availing ourselves of this, as many of our people as could handle a needle were set to work to repair the sails, and the carpenters were employed to put the boats in order. On the 12th at noon, being then in the latitude of 38 degrees 14 minutes and in the longitude of 206 degrees 17 minutes, the wind returned back to the northward, and on the 15th, in the latitude of 33 degrees 30 minutes, it veered to the east. At this time we saw a tropic bird and a dolphin, the first that we had observed during the passage. On the 17th, the wind veered to the southward, where it continued till the afternoon of the 9th, when a squall of wind and rain brought it at once round by the west to the north. This was in the latitude of 32 degrees 26 minutes and in the longitude of 207 degrees 30 minutes. The wind presently increased to a very strong gale, attended with rain, so as to bring us under double reefed topsails. In lowering down the main topsail to reef it, the wind tore it quite out of the foot rope, and it was split in several other parts. This sail had only been brought to the yard the day before, after having had a repair. The next morning we got another topsail to the yard. This gale proved to be the forerunner of the trade wind, which, in latitude 25 degrees, veered to east and east-southeast. I continued to steer to the southward till daylight in the morning of the 25th, at which time we were in the latitude of 20 degrees 55 minutes. I now spread the ships and steered to the west. In the evening we joined, and at midnight brought to. At daybreak next morning, land was seen extending from south-southeast to west. We made sail and stood for it. At 8, it extended from southeast half south to west, the nearest part 2 leagues distant. It was supposed that we saw the extent of the land to the east, but not to the west. We were now satisfied that the group of the Sandwich Islands had been only imperfectly discovered, as those of them which we had visited in our progress northward all lie to the leeward of our present station. In the country was an elevated saddle hill, whose summit appeared above the clouds. From this hill the land fell in a gentle slope and terminated in a steep rocky coast, against which the sea broke in a dreadful surf. Finding that we could not weather the island, I bore up and ranged along the coast to the westward. It was not long before we saw people on several parts of the shore, and some houses and plantations. The country seemed to be both well wooded and watered, and running streams were seen falling into the sea in various places. As it was of the last importance to procure a supply of provisions at these islands, and experience having taught me that I could have no chance to succeed in this if a free trade with the natives were to be allowed, that is, if it were left to every man's discretion to trade for what he pleased, and in the manner he pleased. For this substantial reason, I now published an order prohibiting all persons from trading except such as should be appointed by me and Captain Clerke, and even these were enjoined to trade only for provisions and refreshments. Women were also forbidden to be admitted into the ships, except under certain restrictions. But the evil I meant to prevent by this regulation, I soon found, had already got amongst them. At noon, the coast extended from south 81 degrees east to north 56 degrees west. A low flat, like an isthmus, bore south 42 degrees west. The nearest shore 3 or 4 miles distant. The latitude was 20 degrees 59 minutes, and the longitude 203 degrees 50 minutes. Seeing some canoes coming off to us, I brought to. As soon as they got alongside, many of the people who conducted them came into the ship without the least hesitation. We found them to be of the same nation with the inhabitants of the islands more to leeward, which we had already visited, and, if we did not mistake them, they knew of our having been there. Indeed, it rather appeared too evident, for these people had got amongst them the venereal distemper, and, as yet, I knew of no other way of its reaching them but by an intercourse with their neighbours since our leaving them. We got from our visitors a quantity of cuttlefish, for nails and pieces of iron. They brought very little fruit and roots, but told us they had plenty of them on their island, as also hogs and fowls. In the evening, the horizon being clear to the westward, we judged the westernmost land in sight to be an island, separated from that off which we now were. Having no doubt that the people would return to the ships next day with the produce of their country, I kept plying off all night, and in the morning stood close inshore. At first only a few of the natives visited us, but toward noon we had the company of a good many, who brought with them breadfruit, potatoes, taro or iri roots, a few plantains and small pigs, all of which they exchanged for nails and iron tools. Indeed, we had nothing else to give them. We continued trading with them till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when, having disposed of all their cargoes, and not seeming inclined to fetch more, we made sail and stood off shore. While we were lying to, though the wind blew fresh, I observed that the ships drifted to the east. Consequently, there must have been a current setting in that direction. This encouraged me to ply to windward, with a view to get round the east end of the island, and so have the whole lee side before us. In the afternoon of the 30th, being off the northeast end of the island, several canoes came off to the ships. Most of these belonged to a chief named Teri Obu, who came in one of them. He made me a present of 2 or 3 small pigs, and we got by barter from the other people a little fruit. After a stay of about 2 hours, they all left us, except 6 or 8 of their company, who chose to remain on board. A double sailing canoe came soon after to attend upon them, which we towed astern all night. In the evening we discovered another island to windward, which the natives call Owaihi. The name of that off which we had been for some days, we were also told, is Maui. On the 1st of December, at 8 in the morning, Owaihi extended from south 22 degrees east to south 12 degrees west, and Maui from north 41 degrees to north 83 degrees west. Finding that we could fetch Owaihi, I stood for it, and our visitors from Maui not choosing to accompany us, embarked in their canoe and went ashore. At 7 in the evening, we were close up with the north side of Hawaii, where we spent the night standing off and on. In the morning of the 2nd, we were surprised to see the summits of the mountains on Hawaii covered with snow. They did not appear to be of any extraordinary height, and yet, in some places, the snow seemed to be of a considerable depth, and to have lain there some time. As we drew near the shore, some of the natives came off to us. They were a little shy at first, but we soon enticed some of them on board, and at last prevailed upon them to return to the island and bring off what we wanted. Soon after these reached the shore, we had company enough, and few coming empty-handed, we got a tolerable supply of small pigs, fruit, and roots. We continued trading with them till 6 in the evening, when we made sail and stood off, with a view to plying to windward round the island. In the evening of the 4th, we observed an eclipse of the moon. Mr. King made use of a night telescope, a circular aperture being placed at the object end, about 1/3 of the size of the common aperture. I observed with the telescope of one of Ramsden's sextants, which, I think, answers this purpose as well as any other. The following times are the means, as observed by us both. 6 hours, 3 minutes, 25 seconds, beginning of the eclipse, longitude 204 degrees, 40 minutes, 45 seconds, 8 hours, 27 minutes, 25 seconds, end of the eclipse, longitude 204 degrees, 25 minutes, 15 seconds, mean 204 degrees, 35 minutes, 0 seconds. The penumbra was visible at least 10 minutes before the beginning and after the end of the eclipse. I measured the uneclipsed part of the moon with one of Ramsden's sextants several times before, at, and after the middle of the eclipse, but did not get the time of the middle so near as might have been effected by this method. Indeed, these observations were made only as an experiment, without aiming at much nicety. I also measured mostly one way, whereas I ought to have brought alternately the reflected and direct images to contrary sides with respect to each other, reading the numbers off the quadrant, in one case, to the left of the beginning of the divisions, and in the other case to the right hand of the same. It is evident that half the sum of these two numbers must be the true measurement, independent of the error of the quadrant, and this is the method that I would recommend. But I am well assured that it might have been observed much nearer, and that this method may be useful when neither the beginning nor end of an eclipse can be observed, which may often happen. Immediately after the eclipse was over, we observed the distance of each limb of the moon from Pollux and Raiatea, the one being to the east and the other to the west. An opportunity to observe, under all these circumstances, seldom happens, but when it does, it ought not to be omitted, as in this case the local errors to which these observations are liable destroy each other, which, in all other cases, would require the observations of a whole moon. The following are the results of these observations. Myself with Raiatea, 204 degrees, 22 minutes, 7 seconds, Pollux, 204 degrees, 20 minutes, 4 seconds, mean 204 degrees, 21 minutes, 5 seconds. Mr. King with Raiatea, 204 degrees 27 minutes 45 seconds, Pollux 204 degrees 9 minutes 12 seconds, Mean 204 degrees 18 minutes 29 seconds, mean of the two means 204 degrees 19 minutes 47 seconds. The timekeeper at 4 hours 30 minutes, to which time all the lunar observations are reduced, 204 degrees 4 minutes 45 seconds. The current which I have mentioned as setting to the eastward had now ceased, for we gained but little by plying. On the 6th in the evening, being about 5 leagues farther up the coast and near the shore, we had some traffic with the natives. But as it had furnished only a trifling supply, I stood in again the next morning, when we had a considerable number of visitors, and we lay to, trading with them till 2 in the forenoon. By that time we had procured pork, fruit, and roots sufficient for 4 or 5 days. We then made sail and continued to ply to windward. Having procured a quantity of sugar cane, and having, upon a trial, made but a few days before, found that a strong decoction of it produced a very palatable beer, I ordered some more to be brewed for our general use. But when the cask was now broached, not one of my crew would even so much as taste it. As I had no motive in preparing this beverage, but to save our spirit for a colder climate, I gave myself no trouble, either by exerting authority, or by having recourse to persuasion, to prevail upon them to drink it, knowing that there was no danger of the scurvy, so long as we could get a plentiful supply of other vegetables. But, that I might not be disappointed in my views, I gave orders that no grog should be served in either ship. I myself and the officers continued to make use of this sugar cane beer whenever we could get materials for brewing it. A few hops, of which we had some on board, improved it much. It has the taste of new malt beer, and I believe no one will doubt of its being very wholesome. And yet my inconsiderate crew alleged that it was injurious to their health. They had no better reason to support a resolution which they took on our first arrival in King George's Sound, not to drink the spruce beer made there. But, whether from a consideration that it was not the first time of their being required to use that liquor, or from some other reason, they did not attempt to carry their purpose into actual execution, and I had never heard of it till now, when they renewed their ignorant opposition to my best endeavours to serve them. Every innovation whatever on board a ship, though ever so much to the advantage of seamen, is sure to meet with their highest disapprobation. Both portable soup and sauerkraut were, at first, condemned as stuff unfit for human beings. Few commanders have introduced into their ships more novelties, as useful varieties of food and drink, than I have done. Indeed, few commanders have had the same opportunities of trying such experiments, or been driven to the same necessity of trying them. It has, however, been in a great measure owing to various little deviations from established practice that I have been able to preserve my people, generally speaking, from that dreadful distemper, the scurvy, which has perhaps destroyed more of our sailors in their peaceful voyages than have fallen to the enemy in military expeditions. I kept at some distance from the coast till the 13th, when I stood in again 6 leagues farther to windward than we had as yet reached, and, after having some trade with the natives who visited us, returned to sea. I should have got near the shore again on the 15th for a supply of fruit or roots, but the wind happening to be at southeast by south and south-southeast, I thought this a good time to stretch to the eastward in order to get round, or, at least, to get a sight of the southeast end of the island. The wind continued at southeast by south most part of the 16th. It was variable between south and east on the 17th, and on the 18th it was continually veering from one quarter to another, blowing, sometimes in hard squalls, and at other times calm, with thunder, lightning, and rain. In the afternoon we had the wind westerly for a few hours, but in the evening it shifted to east by south, and we stood to the southward, close hauled, under an easy sail, as the Discovery was at some distance astern. At this time the southeast point of the island bore southwest by south, about 5 leagues distant, and I made no doubt that I should be able to weather it. But at 1 o'clock next morning it fell calm, and we were left to the mercy of a northeasterly swell which impelled us fast toward the land, so that, long before daybreak, we saw lights upon the shore, which was not more than a league distant. The night was dark, with thunder, lightning, and rain. At 3 o'clock the calm was succeeded by a breeze from the south by east, blowing in squalls with rain. We stood to the northeast, thinking it the best tack to clear the coast, but if it had been daylight we should have chosen the other. At daybreak the coast was seen extending from north by west to southwest by west, a dreadful surf breaking upon the shore, which was not more than half a league distant. It was evident that we had been in the most imminent danger. Nor were we yet in safety, the wind veering more easterly, so that, for some time, we did but just keep our distance from the coast. What made our situation more alarming was the leech rope of the main topsail giving way, which was the occasion of the sails being rent in two, and the 2 top-gallant sails gave way in the same manner, though not half worn out. By taking a favourable opportunity, we soon got others to the yards, and then we left the land astern. The Discovery, by being at some distance to the north, was never near the land, nor did we see her till 8 o'clock. End of section 44. Section 45 of the Third Voyage of James Cook, Volume 2 by James Cook. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Book 4, Chapter 12, Part 2. Departure from Oonalashka and Future Views. The Island Amokta. Situation of a remarkable rock. The strait between Oonalashka and Oonella repassed. Progress to the south. Melancholy accident on board the Discovery. Moe, one of the Sandwich Islands, discovered. Intercourse with the natives. Visit from Teriobu. Another island called Owaihi discovered. The ships ply to windward to get round it. An eclipse of the moon observed. The crew refused to drink sugar cane beer. Cordage deficient in strength. Commendation of the natives of Owaihi. The Resolution gets to windward of the island. Her progress down the southeast coast. Views of the country and visits from the natives. The Discovery joins. slow progressed westward. Karakakoa Bay examined by Mr. Bligh. Vast concourse of the natives. The ship's anchor in the bay. Continued. On this occasion, I cannot help observing that I have always found that the bolt ropes to our sails have not been of sufficient strength or substance. This, at different times, has been the source of infinite trouble and vexation, and of much expense of canvas, ruined by their giving way. I wish also that I did not think there is room for remarking that the cordage and canvas, and indeed all the other stores made use of in the Navy, are not of equal goodness with those, in general, used in the merchant service. It seems to be a very prevalent opinion amongst naval officers of all ranks that the King's stores are better than any others, and that no ships are so well fitted out as those in the Navy. Undoubtedly, they are in the right as to the quantity, but, I fear, not as to the quality of the stores. This, indeed, is seldom tried, for things are generally condemned or converted to some other use by such time as they are half worn out. It is only on such voyages as ours that we have an opportunity of making the trial, as our situation makes it necessary to wear everything to the very utmost. Footnote: Captain Clerke may, in part, be right in his comparison of some cordage used in the King's service with what is used in that of the merchants, especially in time of war, when part of the cordage wanted in the Navy is, from necessity, made by contract. But it is well known that there is no better cordage than what is made in the King's yards. The explanation of the preceding paragraph has been subjoined on the authority of a naval officer of distinguished rank and great professional ability, who has, at the same time, recommended it as a necessary precaution that ships fitted out on voyages of discovery should be furnished with no cordage but what is made in the King's yards, and, indeed, that every article of their store of every kind should be the best that can be made. End footnote. As soon as daylight appeared, the natives ashore displayed a white flag, which we conceive to be a signal of peace and friendship. Some of them ventured out after us, but the wind freshening, and it not being safe to wait, they were soon left astern. In the afternoon, after making another attempt to weather the eastern extreme, which failed, I gave it up and ran down to the Discovery. Indeed, it was of no consequence to get round the island, for we had seen its extent to the southeast, which was the thing I aimed at, and according to the information which we had got from the natives, there is no other island to the windward of this. However, as we were so near the south end of it, and as the least shift of wind in our favour would serve to carry us round, I did not wholly give up the idea of weathering it, and therefore continued to ply. On the 20th, at noon, this south-east point bore south 3 leagues distant, the snowy hills west-northwest, and we were about 4 miles from the nearest shore. In the afternoon, some of the natives came in their canoes, bringing with them a few pigs and plantains. The latter were very acceptable, having had no vegetables for some days, but the supply we now received was so inconsiderable being barely sufficient for one day, that I stood in again the next morning till within 3 or 4 miles of the land, where we were met by a number of canoes laden with provisions. We brought to and continued trading with the people in them till 4 in the afternoon, when, having got a pretty good supply, we made sail and stretched off to the northward. I had never met with a behaviour so free from reserve and suspicion in my intercourse with any tribes of savages as we experienced in the people of this island. It was very common for them to send up into the ship the several articles they brought off for barter. Afterward they would come in themselves and make their bargains on the quarter-deck. The people of Otaheite, even after our repeated visits, do not care to put so much confidence in us. I infer from this that those of Hawaii must be more faithful in their dealings with one another than the inhabitants of Otaheite are. For if little faith were observed amongst themselves, they would not be so ready to trust strangers. It is also to be observed, to their honour, that they had never once attempted to cheat us in exchanges, nor to commit a theft. They understand trading as well as most people, and seem to comprehend clearly the reason of our plying upon the coast. For, though they brought off provisions in great plenty, particularly pigs, yet they kept up their price, and, rather than dispose of them for less than they thought they were worth, would take them ashore again. On the 22nd, at 8 in the morning, we tacked to the southward, with a fresh breeze at east by north. At noon, the latitude was 20 degrees 28 minutes 30 seconds, and the Snowy Peak bore southwest half south. We had a good view of it the preceding day, and the quantity of snow seemed to have increased, and to extend lower down the hill. I stood to the southeast till midnight, then tacked to the north till 4 in the morning, when we returned to the southeast tack, and as the wind was at northeast by east, we had hopes of weathering the island. We should have succeeded if the wind had not died away and left us to the mercy of a great swell, which carried us fast toward the land, which was not 2 leagues distant. At length we got our head off, and some light puffs of wind, which came with showers of rain, put us out of danger. While we lay, as it were, becalmed, several of the islanders came off with hogs, fowls, fruit, and roots. Out of one canoe we got a goose, which was about the size of a Muscovy duck. Its plumage was dark grey, and the bill and legs black. At 4 in the afternoon, after purchasing everything that the natives had brought off, which was full as much as we had occasion for, we made sail, and stretched to the north, with the wind at east-northeast. At midnight we tacked, and stood to the southeast. Upon a supposition that the Discovery would see us tack, the signal was omitted, but she did not see us, as we afterward found, and continued standing to the north, for at daylight next morning she was not in sight. At this time, the weather being hazy, we could not see far, so that it was possible the Discovery might be following us, and being past the northeast part of the island, I was tempted to stand on till, by the wind veering to northeast, we could not weather the land upon the other tack. Consequently, we could not stand to the north to join or look for the Discovery. At noon we were, by observation, in the latitude of 19 degrees 55 minutes and in the longitude of 205 degrees 3 minutes. The southeast point of the island bore south by east a quarter east, 6 leagues distant. The other extreme bore north 60 degrees west, and we were 2 leagues from the nearest shore. At 6 in the evening, the southernmost extreme of the island bore southwest, the nearest shore 7 or 8 miles distant, so that we had now succeeded in getting to the windward of the island, which we had aimed at with so much perseverance. The Discovery, however, was not yet to be seen, but the wind, as we had it, being very favourable for her to follow us, I concluded that it would not be long before she joined us. I therefore kept cruising off the southeast point of the island, which lies in the latitude of 19 degrees 34 minutes and in the longitude of 205 degrees 6 minutes, till I was satisfied that Captain Clerke could not join me here. I now conjectured that he had not been able to weather the northeast part of the island and had gone to leeward in order to meet me that way. As I generally kept from 5 to 10 leagues from the land, no canoes, except one, came off to us till the 28th, when we were visited by a dozen or 14. The people who conducted them brought, as usual, the produce of the island. I was very sorry that they had taken the trouble to come so far, for we could not trade with them, our old stock not being as yet consumed, and we had found, by late experience, that the hogs could not be kept alive, nor the roots preserved from putrefaction many days. However, I intended not to leave this part of the island before I got a supply, as it would not be easy to return to it again in case it should be found necessary. We began to be in want on the 30th, and I would have stood in near the shore, but was prevented by a calm, but a breeze springing up at midnight from south and southwest, we were enabled to stand in for the land at daybreak. At 10 o'clock in the morning, we were met by the islanders with fruit and roots, but in all the canoes were only 3 small pigs. Our not having bought those which had been lately brought off may be supposed to be the reason of this very scanty supply. We brought 2 for the purposes of trade, but soon after our marketing was interrupted by a very hard rain, and, besides, we were rather too far from the shore. Nor durst I go nearer, for I could not depend upon the wind's remaining where it was for a moment, the swell also being high and setting obliquely upon the shore, against which it broke in a frightful surf. In the evening the weather mended, the night was clear, and it was spent in making short boards. Before daybreak, the atmosphere was again loaded with heavy clouds, and the new year was ushered in with very hard rain, which continued at intervals till past 10 o'clock. The wind was southerly, a light breeze with some calms. When the rain ceased, the sky cleared and the breeze freshened. Being at this time about 5 miles from the land, several canoes arrived with fruit and roots, and at last some hogs were brought off. We lay to, trading with them till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when, having a tolerable supply, we made sail, with a view of proceeding to the northwest or lee side of the island to look for the Discovery. It was necessary, however, the wind being at south, to stretch first to the eastward till midnight, when the wind came more favourable, and we went upon the other tack. For several days past, both wind and weather had been exceedingly unsettled, and there fell a great deal of rain. The 3 following days were spent in running down the southeast side of the island, for during the nights we stood off and on, and part of each day was employed in lying to, in order to furnish an opportunity to the natives of trading with us. They sometimes came on board while we were 5 leagues from the shore, but whether from a fear of losing their goods in the sea, or from the uncertainty of a market, they never brought much with them. The principal article procured was salt, which was extremely good. On the 5th in the morning, we passed the south point of the island, which lies in the latitude of 18 degrees 54 minutes, and beyond it we found the coast to trend north 60 degrees west. On this point stands a pretty large village, the inhabitants of which thronged off to the ship with hogs and women. It was not possible to keep the latter from coming on board, and no women I ever met with were less reserved. Indeed, it appeared to me that they visited us with no other view than to make a surrender of their persons. As I had now got a quantity of salt, I purchased no hogs but such as were fit for salting, refusing all that were under size. However, we could seldom get any above 50 or 60 pounds weight. It was happy for us that we still had some vegetables on board, for we now received few such productions. Indeed, this part of the country, from its appearance, did not seem capable of affording them. Marks of its having been laid waste by the explosion of a volcano everywhere presented themselves, and though we had as yet seen nothing like one upon the island, the devastation that it had made in this neighbourhood was visible to the naked eye. This part of the coast is sheltered from the raining winds, but we could find no bottom to anchor upon, a line of 160 fathoms not reaching it, within the distance of half a mile from the shore. The islanders having all left us toward the evening, we ran a few miles down the coast, and then spent the night standing off and on. The next morning the natives visited us again, bringing with them the same articles of commerce as before. Being now near the shore, I sent Mr. Bligh, the master, in a boat to sound the coast, with orders to land and to look for fresh water. Upon his return, he reported that, at 2 cables' length from the shore, he had found no soundings with a line of 160 fathoms, that, when he landed, he found no stream or spring, but only rain-water deposited in holes upon the rocks, and even that was brackish from the spray of the sea, and that the surface of the country was entirely composed of slags and ashes, with a few plants here and there interspersed. Between 10 and 11 we saw with pleasure the Discovery coming round the south point of the island, and at 1 in the afternoon she joined us. Captain Clerke, then coming on board, informed us that he had cruised 4 or 5 days where we were separated, and then plied round the east side of the island, but that, meeting with unfavourable winds, he had been carried to some distance from the coast. He had one of the islanders on board all this time, who had remained there from choice, and had refused to quit the ship, though opportunities had offered. Having spent the night standing off and on, we stood in again the next morning, and when we were about a league from the shore, many of the natives visited us. At noon the observed latitude was 19 degrees 1 minute, and the longitude by the timekeeper was 203 degrees 26 minutes. The island extending from south 74 degrees east to north 13 degrees west, the nearest part 2 leagues distant. At daybreak on the 8th, we found that the currents during the night, which we spent in plying, had carried us back considerably to windward, so that we were now off the southwest point of the island. There we brought to, in order to give the natives an opportunity of trading with us. At noon, our observed latitude was 19 degrees 4 minutes, and our longitude by the timekeeper was 203 degrees 13 minutes. The southwest point of the island bearing north 30 degrees east, 2 miles distant. We spent the night as usual, standing off and on. It happened that 4 men and 10 women who had come on board the preceding day still remained with us. As I did not like the company of the latter, I stood inshore toward noon, principally with a view to get them out of the ship, and some canoes coming off, I took that opportunity of sending away our guests. We had light airs from northwest and southwest, and calms till 11 in the morning of the 10th, when the wind freshened at west-northwest, which, with a strong current setting to the southeast, so much retarded us that in the evening, between 7 and 8 o'clock, the south point of the island bore north 10.5 degrees west, 4 leagues distant. The South Snowy Hill now bore north 1.5 degrees east. At 4 in the morning of the 11th, the wind having fixed at west, I stood in for the land in order to get some refreshments. As we drew near the shore, the natives began to come off. We lay to, or stood on and off, trading with them all the day, but got a very scanty supply at last. Many canoes visited us, whose people had not a single thing to barter, which convinced us that this part of the island must be very poor, and that we had already got all that they could spare. We spent the 12th plying off and on, with a fresh gale at west. A mile from the shore, and to the northeast of the south point of the island, having tried soundings, we found ground at 55 fathoms depth, the bottom a fine sand. At 5 in the evening we stood to the southwest, with the wind at west-northwest, and soon after midnight we had a calm. At 8 o'clock next morning, having got a small breeze at south-southeast, we steered to the north-northwest in for the land. Soon after a few canoes came alongside with some hogs, but without any vegetables, which articles we most wanted. We had now made some progress, for at noon the south point of the island bore south 86.5 degrees east, the southwest point north 13 degrees west, the nearest shore 2 leagues distant. Latitude by observation 18 degrees 56 minutes, and our longitude by the timekeeper 203 degrees 40 minutes. We had got the length of the southwest point of the island in the evening, but the wind now veering to the westward and northward, during the night we lost all that we had gained. Next morning, being still off the southwest point of the island, some canoes came off, but they brought nothing that we were in want of. We had now neither fruit nor roots, and were under a necessity of making use of some of our sea provisions. At length some canoes from the northward brought us a small supply of hogs and roots. We had variable light airs next to a calm the following day till 5 in the afternoon, when a small breeze at east-northeast springing up, we were at last enabled to steer along shore to the northward. The weather being fine, we had plenty of company this day and abundance of everything. Many of our visitors remained with us on board all night, and we towed their canoes astern. At daybreak on the 16th, seeing the appearance of a bay, I sent Mr. Bligh with a boat from each ship to examine it, being at this time 3 leagues off. Canoes now began to arrive from all parts, so that before 10 o'clock there were not fewer than 1,000 about the 2 ships, most of them crowded with people and well laden with hogs and other productions of the islands. We had the most satisfying proof of their friendly intentions, for we did not see a single person who had with him a weapon of any sort. Trade and curiosity alone had brought them off. Among such numbers as we had at times on board, it is no wonder that some should betray a thievish disposition. One of our visitors took out of the ship a boat's rudder. He was discovered, but too late to recover it. I thought this a good opportunity to show these people the use of firearms, and 2 or 3 muskets and as many 4-pounders were fired over the canoe, which carried off the rudder. As it was not intended that any of the shots should take effect, the surrounding multitude of natives seemed rather more surprised than frightened. In the evening Mr. Bligh returned and reported that he had found a bay in which was good anchorage and fresh water in a situation tolerably easy to be come at. Into this bay I resolved to carry the ships, there to refit and supply ourselves with every refreshment the place could afford. As night approached, the greater part of our visitors retired to the shore, but numbers of them requested our permission to sleep on board. Curiosity was not the only motive, at least with some, for the next morning several things were missing, which determined me not to entertain so many another night. At 11 o'clock in the forenoon we anchored in the bay, which is called by the natives Karakakua, in 13 fathoms water, over a sandy bottom, and about 1/4 of a mile from the northeast shore. In this situation, the south point of the bay bore south by west, and the north point west 1/2 north. We moored with the stream anchor and cable to the northward, unbent the sails, and struck the yards and topmasts. The ships continued to be much crowded with natives, and were surrounded by a multitude of canoes. I had nowhere, in the course of my voyages, seen so numerous a body of people assembled at one place. For besides those who had come off to us in canoes, all the shore of the bay was covered with spectators, and many hundreds were swimming round the ships like shoals of fish. We could not but be struck with the singularity of this scene, and perhaps there were few on board who now lamented our having failed in our endeavours to find a northern passage homeward last summer. To this disappointment we owed our having it in our power to revisit the Sandwich Islands, and to enrich our voyage with a discovery which, though the last, seemed in many respects to be the most important that had hitherto been made by Europeans throughout the extent of the Pacific Ocean. Here Captain Cook's journal ends. The remaining transactions of the voyage are related by Captain King in the last volume. End of the 6th volume. End of section 45. End of the 3rd voyage of James Cook, volume 2 by James Cook.